right, welcome to the Cwic Media Come Follow Me series. In this episode, we are covering the Book of Job. This is one of my favorite books in the Old Testament. It is probably one of the least read books in the Old Testament. And there are a couple of reasons for that. I think one is that we don't have the context for the book always in place when we begin to read it. And secondly, it is a book that is written in mostly, almost all of it is written in poetry. So it's like going and reading Shakespeare, and it really is. Let me give you three quotes here, not from the book, but about the book. This is from Victor Hugo, the author Victor Hugo. He says, "Tomorrow, if all literature was to be destroyed, and it was left to me to retain one work only, I should save Job." Victor Hugo, right? So of all literature, this is what he would save. Here's a second one. "There is nothing written, I think, in the Bible or out of it of equal merit." That's Thomas Carlyle. And then Alfred Lloyd Tennyson says, "The greatest poem of ancient or modern times is the Book of Job." So this is a masterful work of literature, and it should be seen that way. It is really, when you stop and really look at the quality of the writing on this, and I'm no literary expert, but it is a lot like reading something like Shakespeare. So someone very, very talented, perhaps more than one person. There looks like there might be at least one insertion, maybe more, into this after it was written. But someone very, very talented, a very talented poet and writer, wrote at least the majority of the Book of Job, and we want to keep that in mind when we read it. Now, another thing to look at here, a couple more here. John Calvin, right, the Protestant John Calvin, he preached more sermons on Job than on any other book in the Bible. And Goethe's Faust, right, is a retelling of the Book of Job. So a little more context here. Now, you've heard me talk a lot about temple imagery and drama as an interpreter, right? It's a quick interpreter that I use for looking at the scriptures. Well, we certainly want to use that here. Not as much the temple imagery here, but the drama, definitely. And there is temple imagery also. This, to me, is a drama. It is a play. And that's another reason why people have a difficult time with this book, is because they're not looking at it properly. They're looking at it again as if someone is writing down play by play, like on a game. Kind of like watching a football game, right? Oh, this is what happened. They threw it to the 17-yard line. It was received. They fought it on. They caught it the ball on the right hash, or touchdown after 32 yards on a third down play. Yeah, this is exactly how this happened. This is not how this book or any of the scriptures are written, and so we always want to keep that in mind. But this one especially is a drama. It is a drama in many ways. It is kind of like a temple drama. But this is the same idea as going back and looking at the Greek dramas, right? This is a way anciently that if this is a play, I really believe it is, then it's a way of giving a very compelling story. It is a way for a writer, perhaps a prophet, but if not, somebody at least inspired, that can put across a message to that culture, to those people. And it's done in a compelling way. And it can be told as a story, as a narrative. It can be acted out. And again, the thing I love about the idea of temple imagery and drama is that we can put ourselves into the character's shoes. And that's how we should look at things. So often from the prophet's point of view, we get this, and great, but we should be putting ourselves into the prophet's shoes. And then we should be putting ourselves into the people's shoes and other characters' shoes when we read the scriptures. That's what we have with the temple up until very recently, right? It's the temple is done as a play. It's done as a drama. And members of the church come in and they act in the roles of Elohim and Jehovah and Peter and James and Satan and Eve, and right? It's all part of a play. And so we step into those roles, and that's the way this should be looked at. That doesn't mean it's not true. That doesn't mean there wasn't a character Job. If we go to section 121, where Job is pulled up by the Savior himself and speaking with or inspiring Joseph Smith, it kind of leans that way, that there was a Job, although he could also just be referring to the book of Job and the character in the book of Job. But it doesn't matter, right? That doesn't matter. The point is that we believe that this is inspired work and that there are eternal lessons for us to learn from this. And so, but again, if you read the book as a play, I think you're going to get a lot more out of it. I really do. When the prophets write, they're not writing, not that this is written by a prophet, I don't know if it is, but the scriptures are written spiritually. Oftentimes they're not even chronologically written, right? You might not even get the play-by-play. It's, the third quarter of the game is actually in the place of the first quarter of the game, and the second and the fourth. And it's not the point that they're trying to put across in the scriptures. They are writing spiritually. That does not mean it's not true. It means that they are trying to get across a message to you. And as we go through the scriptures, you get that thread and you get that message of the gospel of Jesus Christ and the lessons to be learned from history, even if the history isn't jotted down exactly like a historian would write it. So as we go through the book here, and it's 42 chapters of just verse after verse after verse that is very quotable. And of all the books, this is one of those, where we go through Come Follow Me. This is one of those where I hope you go beyond just listening or watching some Come Follow Me episodes. You actually delve into this book, because it really is magnificent in the message, in the philosophy behind it, in the questions that are asked, and in the meaning behind the book. It's really something as you go through it and go through it a second time and a third time, etc. But look at it as a drama here. Couple more things here that I would look at. You have Job as the main character, of course, in this, and then you have these three friends, which are kind of interesting, right? You've got Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. We get these three types of friends or characters or angels in many places in the scriptures. We get the same thing in the temple drama. You have three visitors or messengers that come to Adam and Eve. We call them Peter, James, or John. That doesn't mean what the drama is trying to tell you is that it's Peter, James, and John. Maybe it is, but that's not the point. The point is priesthood. The point is a hierarchical structure and delegation coming down through as we talk about DBR, the word, the order that is coming down ultimately from Elohim. Right? You have the three messengers that come to Abraham. You've got the three Nephites. You've got, this is a very common theme that you get. And so these friends are coming to them, but there's a play on these, there's a play on this, no pun intended here, but there's a play on this play with these characters, all of them. And you're going to see two different sides from the friends, and you're going to see two different sides of Job as you go through this. One thing I love about the book is the struggle, right, that Job is going to go through and the way it's depicted. It's a wrestle. He's wrestling with God. He's wrestling with his condition. And I like that. I like the way he handles this. I like the way the author puts this in. And there's a process. And sometimes there's a little bit of contending with God for a little bit as to what is going on. And I'll go over, I'll show you why I like it. It's just me, right? It's just me. But it's, you're going to see the two sides that the author works on with all of these characters. Then you have Elihu or Elihu that comes in. That's probably an insertion that comes later on, and he's in a few of the chapters. There are more words in this, more Hebrew words in the book of Job that are what we call hapax legomenon, which are words that are They're not found anywhere else. They're singularities in the Hebrew Bible, right? So it's harder to get context with these words, because normally you find a word, let's say it is atonement, kippur, or something of covering, and you look throughout the Bible and you can see other places where a form of this word is used, and you get more and more context to be able to translate that into another language. Okay, that's not what you can do with these words in Job. You don't find them anywhere else. So the translation gets a little bit tricky with those. Another thing to consider here, and you can see that I'm doing a lot to set this book up, because it really does deserve the context, is that Job is not an Israelite that we know of. There's no mention of him in his genealogy. There's no mention of him being from Jacob or Abraham even. He's not related to anyone in a tribe that we know of. So there's no attachment to Israel here, which is, I think, on purpose. I think this is on purpose. We don't know where the book came from. We don't know its origin. We don't know where it takes place, although there are hints that it takes place in Arabia, or what was known as Arabia, perhaps the northern parts of Arabia and beyond in ancient times. It seems to be written with a specific purpose. And I don't know this, but it seems to me that it is written with a purpose. I'm going to get to that in a second here. Now, the poet here seems to be laying out a common cultural belief about suffering. And there's questions and themes that we can find in this book that are very important. They have to do with a lot of the reasons why people become atheists or become bitter against God. Maybe you've struggled with this in the past, right? And the primary one is the problem of evil. How do we square the problem of evil with the existence of God? That's a major issue that people have it's a hurdle for a lot of people to get over. Maybe you've struggled with this, right? And then the other one, and looking at this, is if you're righteous, right, then you're going to be blessed, and maybe right away. And if you're not, if you're wicked, then you're going to be cursed, maybe right away. Okay, this is not true. Yet it is a belief that existed in parts of Israel and in certain time periods, especially in the time period of the Deuteronomists, which would carry all the way down to the time of Jesus Christ on earth. And so you can say, okay, well, if someone was blind, it's because of the sins of that person, or maybe even their parents. They were born blind. So it's the sinning of the parents for them being blind, right? Or if there is great abundance and wealth, it's because you're living right. And the Lord is blessing you because of your choices. Well, we know that that isn't true. But that's the way the Deuteronomists believed. And it's part of their orthodoxy. And so what seems to be happening here, and this is what several biblical scholars believe, I lean toward this, is that the author is actually preaching against a certain Deuteronomistic orthodoxy that existed. And, very fundamentalist type of a view of sin and consequences of sin. We ask ourselves questions like, does God make us suffer? Think about that for a second. Does God make us suffer? This is one of the most important questions of the book. I'm wondering here as I say this, what your answer is. Does God make us suffer? Well, Greg, that's Satan that causes that. Is it? Can he intervene at any time? Does that intervention or lack of intervention, is that a cause from him, or is it a cause of the adversary? Right? Can we see the world and sin and adversity and pain and suffering, trials and tribulations from God's perspective? or do we just see it from a mortal perspective? Okay. So when we consider those things, we can look a little bit more at just kind of setting the stage here, pun intended, for this play, and for understanding what is going on in the drama with the book of Job. Okay, so let's, with that, move right into the first chapter of Job here. Let's look at the summary here. It says, Job, a just and perfect man, is blessed with great riches. Okay. You can see, I believe it's at the bottom of this first chapter, what he says about that. And then verse 1, let's just go right into this. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. So when you see this as a work of art, in a sense, this book as a play, then you understand more how the author is working with this, how he's setting things up, right? Job, the primary character, is introduced, and he is a perfect and upright man, and he's blessed with everything. Well, according to, if this is against Deuteronomistic orthodoxy, that's because he's a perfect and upright man. So him being blessed with everything here would go right hand in hand with that. And by the way, that doesn't mean that living right and living orderly, that is, living on principle, wouldn't provide wealth. It probably does in many cases. That's an automatic thing. I mean, when you think about the eternities, what is the wealth of God? Who lives by the word and lives orderly, right? So it's not that his wealth wouldn't come from that, but in this world, in this mortality, it doesn't go hand in hand with making proper decisions all the time. That's not the way this world works, right? But here's how he's introduced. He's an upright and perfect man and wealthy. And I guess I haven't talked about wealth yet. And there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. And then they go over all of his substance, all that he has, all of his wealth. And then down in verse 6 here. Now there was a day when the sons of God, this is interesting. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. What day is this? And Satan came also among them. So here's what I want you to do. This should be seen, I believe, in a premortal counsel lens, where this is referring back to that, although it's kind of maybe pulling it to a temporal setting in a way. But that's what this is to me, right? This is like a play where now Satan is going to be introduced, and this is like the council in heaven, where there was a war. Right, and then I'll show you more why I think this is at least as a call back to the council in heaven here. And the Lord said unto Satan, now wait a minute. The Lord's talking to Satan? Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. Right, he's roaming the earth. It's his world, so to speak. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job? That there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. Okay, so how does this happen? All of a sudden, Satan and God are having the Lord are having a conversation over Job? Well, of course, if we're reading this literally, and when I say literally, I mean at face value, then this is odd. But if we're reading it as a play, then we understand it. We understand how this is working, how it's being set up. It's a drama, right? So he says, if you consider Job, and Satan answered the Lord and said, doth Job fear God for naught? Hast not thou made a hedge about him? Haven't you protected him? And about his house and about all that he hath on every side? Look, of course he's an upright man because he hasn't faced enough adversity. You're watching over him. Now, when you think about that, you might say he lives right, so he's being blessed, right? The Lord has put a hedge around him. Well, when we live right, we also have a hedge put around us from the Lord. But that hedge is not perfect because we must face adversity. And the Lord wants us to face adversity for a good reason. Hast thou not made an hedge about him and about his house and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, right? Because he's living right. There are natural, spiritual consequences and temporal consequences for living right. And his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. Take everything he has away, and he's going to curse you. Okay, so that's interesting. That's an interesting point because the way the author's writing this is that we must be tested beyond a purely transactional way of life of here's my effort and my love and here's my reward and good consequences. Right? That's not enough. Even though there is cause and effect spiritually, something is greater than that. And that is faith. That is trust. And that is being proven. And it's relationship. Right? It's to me, this whole book, when you look at it, this is about Job building a stronger relationship with God. It's not about him at the back end getting all the blessings again after he loses everything. It's about the process that he goes through and the faith that is strengthened and the relationship that grows between him and the Lord. So that's what Satan says, take everything and he's going to curse you. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, all that he hath is in thy power. I am going to unhedge this, and I'm going to allow everything to be taken from him by you. Okay? In other words, Job lives in an imperfect world. And by the way, you're Job, right? You are Job. That's the wonderful thing about looking at the scriptures as a drama, is you step into those shoes more easily. You're the actor. You're Job. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, all that he hath is in thy power. So being that you're in this mortal world, even though you're living spiritually and you're receiving the proper good consequences and rewards for living right, that doesn't mean that mortality isn't going to step in this world, and that adversity isn't going to rear its ugly head. So the Lord says, go ahead. He's in thy power, but don't touch him. You can't do anything to him personally. And so Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. And then you get these four messengers, and you can imagine again in a play here, you have in verse 14, and there came a messenger unto Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the asses feeding beside them. And the Sabeans fell upon them and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Well, that's remarkable. But you can see him running in from stage left on this, right? And while he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, the fire of God is fallen from heaven and hath burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Remarkable. You see him running in from stage right. And then from the back of stage left, while he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, the Chaldeans made out 3 bands and fell upon the camels and have carried them away, yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. It's a great play. And while he was yet speaking, from the back of stage right, there came also another and said, thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. And this is interesting here, what you get with Job at the end of this first intervention of Satan and temporal adversity. And trauma in his life, so to speak, and at least in here in the play. It says, then Job arose and rent his mantle, okay, and shaved his head. This is mourning. This is what you would do anciently, and fell down on the ground and worshipped. So he falls down on the ground and he worships. So this is the opening scene. And said, naked came I out of my mother's womb. So at the beginning of this, right, he is going to be completely aligned with the Lord. Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. So, I think it's important the author puts in here that he didn't sin. This is not, what has been removed from him is not because of sin. He was living right, but he wasn't perfect. When I say perfect, it's not in the sense that is given there at the beginning of the chapter. In other words, he's not like the Savior, right? He doesn't have perfection down. Perfect there means a little something different. So he's aligned completely here with the Lord, even though he's just lost everything. Now, coming beyond this, we get to chapter 2, and we get another round of problems. And there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. You can see the drama happening here. And the Lord said unto Satan, from whence comest thou? And he says the same thing. And Satan answered and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down it. This is his realm. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth? I mean, after all, look how he responded to losing everything. And he's a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. And still he holdeth fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. Let's back up and say that again. This is the Lord talking to Satan. Although thou movest me against him. In other words, you asked me to take the hedge back and open things up, allow adversity, and to destroy him without cause. Cause of what? Well, here again, what we're looking at is cause and effect. We're talking about the way he lives. But there's another free radical, if we will, issue here in this cell or in this atom. And atom, right? And that is faith, and that is humility, that is repentance, that is the relationship we have with God. And that must enter into the equation because it's what it's all about. So Satan answers the Lord and said, skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. Hey, look, you've lost everything, but now I'm going to take you a step further. I want this to go further. And so he put forth thine hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. Well, of course, this sounds just like Satan. Give him an inch, he takes a mile. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, he is thine hand. He is in thine hand, but save his life. So you can't kill him, but you can touch him. And you're going to give him his own problems, more personal to him, even more personal to him, or to him, his own body, so to speak, right? So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. So look at this. More bad things happening to a very good person. Why? And he took him a potsherd and scraped himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. Then said his wife unto him, dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. Right? You can see this again as part of the play, this character coming in here now, the wife coming in and trying to tell him that he needs to curse God. Look at everything that we have lost. Just curse God, and then she says, and die. What she's really saying is give up. Look at all of this. Look what has happened to you. Give up. But he said unto her, Thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What shall we receive? This is such an interesting statement here. Such a strong philosophical couple of phrases here. What shall we receive? Good at the hand of God? Let's back that up. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God? And shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. Right? So this is still right. This is the right thing, and it's not based on his... In other words, the author here is saying that evil does come from God in the sense that he allows it, at least. We're going to see this even stronger here in a bit with even more context outside of the book of Job. So he doesn't sin in saying this. And look, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. That's hard. It's hard to grasp. Wait a minute, I'm living right. So of course he should give, but why would he take away if I'm living right? Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that was come upon him, they came every one from his own place, Eliphaz and Bildad and Zophar. For they had made an appointment together to come to mourn with him and to comfort him. And this is what they end up doing, right? They're going to end up comforting him and bringing a lot of truth to him in helping him to work through all of this and all that has happened to him, right? And we suppose that he loses his wife here as well because he's going to be restored to a wife later on. So he loses everything, all of his family, his wife. He loses all of his assets, all of his wealth is gone. His health is gone. His friends pretty much are gone, right? His friends turn on him, not just these 3 friends. I'll get to that in a minute, but other friends turn on him, and he's looked down on. Why is he looked down on? Well, because as an example, in the orthodoxy of the Deuteronomists, everyone would not just look at him like with shame, like, how did this happen, Job? How does somebody lose all of this? But it would be, you brought this upon yourself. What did you do? How did this happen? What have you done? You are lesser because of this. And if we look at this as a theme of the author going completely against that type of a culture and doctrine, which is what it appears to be to me, then we see why he's bringing all of this up, and we see why he kind of goes back and forth, and why these friends are going to turn on him. Right? They're going to turn on him because they're going to go against the proper idea, the true idea, that bad things happen to good people, and that the Lord requires us to learn this and to go through adversity, and that we are all going to be tested like Abraham and Sarah. We can't get around that. Maybe some are tested less in this life, but maybe they'll be tested more in the next. Or maybe they were tested even more in the previous life. But we can't avoid that. It's impossible to avoid that because it's all about faith, and faith is trust. And without building the trust with family, with God especially, and with true principles, then you cannot become what you need to become, or what you can become. I don't know if need is the right thing, but it's the expectation of the Lord, and it's a righteous expectation. So it's what you can become if you can build the trust. Now, here we get to chapter 3, and now things start to really change here with Job. And again, this is where we're going to get this struggle, this wrestling. That I love this because it feels more real to me. And I love that the author here of the drama captures this so well, right? He says, after this opened Job his mouth and cursed his day. So he's quiet for 7 days with his friends. And he finally says something, and now he's cursing the day. And Job spake and said, let the day perish wherein I was born, and the night in which it was said, that is a man-child conceived. Coming down a little bit more in verse 9, let it look for light, but have none, neither let it see the dawning of the day, because it shut not up the doors of my mother's womb, nor hid sorrow from mine eyes. And then down a little further, why is light given to a man? I just love the questions that you find throughout this book. Why is light given to a man whose way is hid? He can't see beyond it, and whom God hath hedged in. So in here, where's he been hedged in? What is happening here? Why is there a why do you receive light? This is the whole question about progress, right? The more we progress, what happens? The more responsibility we have. Where much is given, much is expected. Well, wait a minute, now I've got higher expectations. Do I want to continue going down that path where I actually have to take on more responsibility, where there are higher expectations of me? I think that is a major part of why people start to turn. It's like, wait a minute here, I'm getting put up higher and higher, or put out there further and further on this limb of responsibility, of spiritual responsibility. Do I want to continue down that path? Do I, as I see this and I'm actually experiencing this, it's like, oh, now there's higher expectations of me. That's what covenants are for. To help you bear the burden of responsibility, right? I covenant to follow through with this. And now there's a higher expectation. I think that's where a lot of people start to take a turn. Do you want that? Do you want more light in your life? Just think about that. I think it's a great question that Job asks here. And then we're going to go through this a little bit here in chapter 4. We've got Eliphaz asks, are the righteous cut off? Shall a man be more pure than his maker? And in 5, Eliphaz counsels Job, man is born unto trouble, right? They're going to say a lot of good, you're going to see the friends come in here, they're going to say a lot of good things, but they're going to, in the end, they turn on him. They say, no, Job, you are a sinner, and that is why this has happened to you. Man is born unto trouble, seek unto God, and happy is the man whom God corrects. So these are all true things. This is like the story from Hugh B. Brown about the currant bush. If you're chastened, you're loved. If you receive chastening from God and from life, it's because God loves you, because he wants you to be something more. In 17, behold, happy is the man whom God correcteth. Therefore despise not thou the chastening of the Almighty, for he maketh sore and bindeth up. He woundeth, and his hands make whole. So again, the way this is set up by the author is that God is responsible for both blessings and curses. And you can say it as if there are natural consequences for acting right and for doing the right things and for obedience and righteousness. But then there is the more mortal side of things here, in this mortality, this temporal side of things, where he holds back and doesn't intervene perhaps, and allows the adversity of a mortal world to take charge sometimes.